legislation.
Much for keeping it KBC. This is Good Morning Kenya. That brief report by our very own was Code 254. That affect you and the Kenyan youth. Very warm welcome if all you've just joined us. My name is Ram Magugo, just in time for the next interview of the day. And this morning we're talking about something that is a taboo for some people, yet it is something that needs to be talked about. As we talk about Health Tuesday, yes, it is health, but we're talking about now we're talking about health in a wholesome level, because now we're talking about the health of our teenagers. We're talking about emotional health, psychological health. We're talking about the health of a person generally. How is it that we are taking care of our teenagers? And I would like to just pose a question, even as we start this conversation, that I would like you maybe to think about or to answer. It may be rhetoric for some, yet you may feel free to answer me. At what age will you allow your child, your son, or your daughter to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend? At what age will you allow your child to have a sexual relationship, or, if I would rather put it differently, to date? When will you allow it? Will you say no, or will you say that it is allowed? Well, this is something that I would like you to be part of, because this morning we're talking about teenage sexuality. Remember, teenagers are also maturing emotionally, they're maturing psychologically, socially. So we need to have this conversation this morning as we talk about, the romantic intimacy that is involved with teenagers. Well, to help us understand more about this issue to do with teenage sexuality, I'm joined by Albert Obui. To my extreme left, he is the Executive Director for Center for the Study of Adolescents. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining me and finding time.
Thank you.
And next to him is Lucy Minayo. She is the Capacity Building Manager for Center for Reproductive Rights here in Kenya. Karibu sana.
Asante.
And I would like you to be part of this conversation about teenage sexuality this morning on our social media platforms. The SMS line is on at the top of your screen. 20154 is the number. Start with the word Channel 1. Tell us your name and where you're watching us from. Make sure that you use the hashtag on Twitter, Good Morning Kenya. Make sure to tag me at Ram Maguko, my colleagues handle at Jane Wamboy, at Ray Manyara, at Doreen Arange. Remember, our social media platforms are on at the bottom of your screen right there. So keep tweeting, keep texting, tell us where you're watching us from, and we'll be sampling them up even as we continue about this. And just first things first, Mr. Albert, do you think the teenagers at some point can be confused about their sexuality? Why is this discussion very important?
I think the growth and development of teenagers is an important national development issue, because they are expected to contribute towards national development now and in the future. Yet we pay very little attention to their sexual growth, to their health, and the kind of issues that affect them when they are growing up sexually. So it's important that we start a conversation both at the family level, at the school level, and also at the community level, to prepare children to know about the changes that are happening in their bodies and how these changes then affect their relationships at the family level and also at the community level, and largely also at the national level. It is such an important agenda that it should be ingrained in all national policies, and we should invest in this program so that young people can grow healthy, they can grow responsibly, and they can then make contributions towards national development for this country. Yeah, so I think what I'm saying, it's a very critical, important issue that we must all pay attention to.
And as we find out, because at the same time, it's a taboo. This discussion is not something that most people can be comfortable in having. Talking about sexuality with your teenage child might be a problem for some parents. Why is it so?
Well, I think part of it has to do with how we've been socialized as a society. Sexuality in many African communities, in our African setup, is a conversation that is had, in private. It's taboo. And so when it comes to adolescents, when it comes to children, we don't imagine that they actually have the capacity, or that they have, they have needs in this regard. And so it's a conversation that we hardly ever have in our homes. We don't have this discussion in our communities. And the challenge is that right now, people are beginning to, because of the age that we are living in, it's a digital age. So this information, young people are getting this information from the internet. We don't know the kind of information they're getting, the accuracy of it. So it's a huge challenge. So I attribute the challenges in terms of the conversation being transparency around the issue to the way that we deal with sexuality generally and the way that we view young people specifically.
And I love what you said there, because some find it difficult to educate the children concerning their sexuality. And I was at a conference a while back, and one of the speakers said that if you don't teach your child or your teenager about these things, then the world will teach them in their own way. If at all you are a spiritual person, if you don't allow them to learn them in church, then they will learn them elsewhere. And it was quite interesting, learning that at the same time, it is real. It is happening, and it will affect us in one way or the other, whether we like it or not. But now, this conversation, for us to further understand it, let's start it from now, the family setup, because you said that we need to look at it also on that line. How should parents be able to engage their children when it comes to their sexuality? Is it possible, and how do they start, bearing in mind that there is the social setup that she has just mentioned?
Yeah, I think building on what Lucy said is that, the traditional cultural systems that existed in Africa because of urbanization and other factors have rapidly been collapsing. So we don't have an opportunity to send our children to the auntie for education or to the grandmother. Those structures are not in place anymore. And so what parents are left with is to be able to engage constructively with their children in terms of conversation and information, finding opportunities of being able to deliver information on growth and the challenges that this growth brings to children. Because of the rapid changes in society, children have access to technology and other gadgets and avenues, and this seems to be one of the major sources of getting information.
And because they don't get it from the parents.
And they're not getting it from the parents. And basically, we know that a huge proportion of the information that is available to children through these platforms is not correct, is not accurate, and can be largely misleading. But again, at the community level, we do not have opportunities for teaching parents so that they are able to deliver this information. We are all focused on teaching children. But parents have a huge responsibility. They have a responsibility of molding. They have a responsibility of giving information that is correct and that is accurate. And we should therefore invest in building the capacities of parents to be able to confidently talk about issues that they have not talked about in the past to their own children. So there are all issues about, menstruation as an important issue. There are issues about starting to build relationships between boys and girls. There are issues around sexual violence and dating and all these issues which are critical for parents to start to engage their children and talk about issues that previously they have not been able to talk to their own children. And it's about building good relationships and building the confidence of the children to trust the parents to be able to engage their own children.
But at the same time, there is a challenge here.
Yeah.
Because we are trying to build both parties, both from the parental side and both also on the teenage side.
Yeah.
But how do we bridge that gap? Because at the same time, we have teenagers who are different. Some are introverts, some are extroverts. Some will tell you what it's inside their heart, and others will withhold information from the parent. How can the parent, starting from the parent side, because as they mentioned, we normally concentrate on teaching the children.
Yeah.
But we forget about teaching the parent.
Yeah.
How, from the parent side, how can they break the ice and reach out to their teenager who is lost somewhere else in the dark, trying to discover themselves through that stage of puberty and adolescence?
Yeah, I think society avails different avenues in which parents could engage their own children. There are community counseling programs where adults can engage adolescents in terms of counseling and support. There are church-sponsored programs that are able to effectively communicate to their children, and they could help parents to be able to talk to their children through these forums. But it's also possible that parents amongst themselves, they find parental peers who have the ability to communicate these matters to their children. So if you don't feel confident enough to talk to your own child, is there an alternate parent who is able to confidently communicate? And it starts by building, relations, building the confidence of children in adults, and adults trusting children also, and holding information and being open avenues in which children can talk to adults more confidently on private matters.
And I like what you say there, in a way that children can be able to communicate with adults confidently on private matters.
Yeah.
But in Africa, this is Africa, where you find you say or do something wrong, kiboko. Is there a way that we can be able to come out of that, so that the child does not feel as though nikiambia mami nitachapwa?
Yeah, so one of the challenges, I think when we were growing up, this is something that we lacked. We did not have, many of us grew up in an age where our parents were extremely strict, trying to understand, they got us when they were very young, trying to understand parenting. And so the default setting for them was kiboko, as you've said.
Fanya kitu, kiboko.
Yeah, so we are living in a different age where children's personalities are coming out at a very young age. Children are demonstrating to their parents that they want to be spoken to as equals, that they want to be understood, that they want to, they want their voices to be listened to. And so it's a different era, and it calls for a different model of parenting. So in addition to, it's creating that environment of trust, it's creating an environment, a non-judgmental environment where your child actually feels that they can come to you as a parent, they can share with you the things that they're struggling with, and that they will not be judged, they will be listened to, they will be supported, they will be encouraged, they will be molded in a way that resonates with their needs at that particular time.
In the current African setting, that is possible. You can achieve that.
So this is happening in some settings. It is happening, and it's what we are saying, that it's important for us to build a society that views children as human, that views children as human beings, that we need to begin having conversations with our children. We need to listen to our children. We need to recognize that they are evolving. They are not the same, the things that we were doing for them when they were young, we kind of step back the older they grow. And it's understanding that they're developing cognitive abilities. They begin to understand. They can communicate. They have desires. They have needs. They want these needs. They table these needs, and they want parents to listen to them. They want society to listen to them. They want to be heard. They want to sit at the table, and they want to, contribute
they
and
also
participate.
Want to be part of the decision-making process.
Precisely. Yeah.
And anyway, this is something I would also like you to think about. Well, for some of us, for example, getting a phone. The first time you handled phones was when you were much older. But nowadays, the kids have access to phones. At tender ages, they can use a smartphone even better than a parent. When was the first time you handled a phone? And you can be able to get that times are changing and seasons are changing. We need to change as things change, that we adapt to the current settings. I was looking at the 2014 Kenya Demographic and Health Survey, and there was a report that half of the women and men begin having sex by the age of 18. Yeah. And that was in 2014. Yeah. But now the statistics have changed. Now, even at the age of 14, people still engage in sexual intimacy and sexual intercourse. If at all we talk about that, is there a cause of alarm looking at the rate of connections, if I would put it that way, that is happening?
Yeah, maybe one maybe is to try to understand one of the reasons or some of the reasons why children start to engage in sexual activity at an early age. We have already said that parents are under pressure, and so you don't have sufficient time to stay with your children because you left in the morning and the mother and the father the same, and so you really have very little time in terms of connection. But we also know, as you mentioned, that children are having access to technology quite early, and they're having access to information that is quite uncensored and uncontrolled, and a huge proportion of that information could also be inappropriate for children, for example. We also know that children get a huge proportion of information from their peers, and some of this information may also not be correct. There are a lot of, there's huge pressure economically on children as well because of poverty and other factors. And so a combination of all these factors would predispose children to sexual activity quite earlier. I mean, the nutrition, the kind of food people are eating, all the changes that are happening in society would make it easier for children to engage in sex at a very early age. What society should be thinking about is how do we start to provide adequate sexuality education information to children to know the kind of changes and how they should respond to this.
And is that information even there in the first place?
Yes, I think we have a broad range information in society which we candidly need to reconstruct and be able to deliver that in the national school curriculum, because this is where we can find a huge proportion of children in an easier way. So instead of dealing with children, in small groups, if this is incorporated in national programs and we have adequately prepared teachers who can be able to deliver this, then a combination of teachers and parents would reduce the challenges that we are seeing in society. Currently, Kenya is having an epidemic, so to say, in terms of teenage pregnancy. And basically, it's because we are not able to provide information in a good way, in a timely way, to be able to start early and to provide correct and accurate information to children to enable them to make good choices about their bodies. And that is not to say that you are sexualizing children, that you're providing information that is wrong to children. We are saying we should be able to educate. The way we educate on biology, the way we educate on mathematics, let's be able to educate on the changes that are happening in their bodies. And this will reduce some of these problems that we face in society quite early and adequately. Let's also engage other people in society, including religious communities, to be able to appreciate that maybe we have not been very effective in the methodologies that we are using. Maybe the kind of information we are giving exclusively on abstinence has not been very effective, and therefore we need to objectively talk to each other to recognize that sexual activity is starting very early. It's affecting millions of children. We are having increasing numbers of teenage pregnancy, and therefore we must institute interventions that would be able to protect the lives of our children in this country.
Is this a reflection of who we are? They normally say that, your child is a reflection of you. What your child does may be a reflection of what you are either teaching or not teaching them. Is this a reflection of us as a society when we have an increase in teenage pregnancies? And I'm aware of the fact that when we have an increase in pregnancies, abortion is not far behind. Is this a reflection of who we are as a society? Are we failing our teenagers?
It's a reflection of the attitude that we've taken as a society of the ostrich attitude, where we think these things are not happening, or we think they're happening, but we don't need to do anything about it. And so we've buried our heads in the sand for so long as a society, and we have not put adequate measures in place to support teenagers to transition, children to transition into adulthood a bit more effectively. It's a reflection of our socialization as a society, and our socialization in the sense that we view teenage sexuality as a deviance. We don't view it, it's deviant behavior, it's wrong behavior in the view of the society. We don't see ourselves as needing to engage in that conversation. So it's a reflection, yes.
It's
a reflection of us
as ourselves.
Precisely, and it's a reflection of how, one, we view teenagers, how we view them and their sexuality, and how we view our role as the society in supporting teenagers to realize healthy reproductive health outcomes. So it's a reflection, yes. And I wouldn't say that it's a failure. I would not be quick to say that it's a failure on the part of parents or the part of the society. Jointly, we have failed our children. When we see young people sitting for examinations pregnant, or sitting for examinations immediately after they have delivered, we should all be ashamed of ourselves, because we have failed, jointly and collectively failed our children, insofar as we have refused to consider very progressively, very objectively, the reproductive health needs of our children. And I also just want to say that part of the reason why we view children the way we do is because of how the law is structured. So the law does not consider children as capable of engaging in sexual conduct. And at this point, it's just to say that it's important for us to note that we are not saying that sexual violence, for example, is not happening in our societies. So part of the pregnancies are attributed to sexual violence, but a significant proportion is also attributed to relationships that are happening between children. And because we are not giving them information, we are telling them that those relationships are wrong. You know, they are experimenting and they are getting pregnant. There's no support for them from the society. There's no support in the schools. There's no support anywhere. So if we are to take anything from, you know, the things that have been happening, the reports that we are receiving from the KCSE exams and KCP exams, is that we need to have a national conversation, a very open discussion about how to address, how to support, how to create an environment that really is supportive of children as they navigate this very difficult transition from childhood into adulthood.
Yeah, yet just to add on this, that you know, Kenya's policy framework affords, it accords us that window of talking, of finding solutions. We have a sexual reproductive health policy that is robust enough, that, you know, is encouraging us to provide services and provide information to our children. We have not just translated these policy frameworks into action to make sure that we responsibly design programs and interventions that will be helpful to the children of this country.
We just have good policies, but implementation is a problem.
Yeah, I think we have weaknesses in terms of how we are translating these policies into practice, but we need to look at them, we need to harmonize them, we need to put money in those policies and to make sure that people understand them and that we are able to implement them to the letter, to make sure that children have access to information, they have access to services, and that they are supported in the process of their growth.
They say that children are a blessing. Yes, children are a blessing. But when you look at the teenage pregnancies that occurred, some students, candidates, did their KCSE and KCPE examinations in hospitals after, you know, giving birth. Some did even before they gave birth. You know, serious numbers in terms of statistics. What came into your mind when you look at the numbers that were there? For example, last year that did KCPE, that were pregnant, experiencing that, looking at that from your own you know, setup as an individual?
Yeah, children can never be blamed for what happens to them. We have society at large, and we have said that society can only respond to that by firstly recognizing that we have a problem on our hands, and secondly, we need to invest in educating children and providing solutions to the challenges that children are facing. And we have said that provide information at the school level, provide information at the household level, and create services that are responsive to the needs of children at the hospital level, at the lowest level in terms of facilities.
Do you think that the church has a role to play? Is the church also having some form of, you know, do you need to blame the church in failing to administer the proper virtues to our children? I remember there were some reports of some pastors even sexually harassing teenagers.
So I don't want to be excommunicated, but just to say that So I earlier alluded to the fact that we all take that joint responsibility in relation to what's happening to our children at the moment. And one of the things that we should aspire to do, even in our religious institutions, is really to create an unjudgmental environment where children actually feel listened to, they actually feel heard. So where children can actually share their views, because all these elements that we are talking about are really the agents of socialization. And so creating an unjudgmental environment really needs to happen as well in the religious institutions. Yes, we have religious teachings that take a certain position, but we have to view them in the context that we are currently living in, and it ultimately rests on the, on the shoulders of the leaders of our religious institutions to ensure that they are actually creating a framework, an environment, a framework of engagement, intergenerational engagement within the religious institution, but more importantly, a framework in which children feel that they can actually come to that religious institution with a problem, and they will not be judged, they will not be turned away, they will not be condemned, they will not be excommunicated.
It should be an environment that is friendly.
So that's extremely important, exactly.
But I'm looking at the environment here, because there is that environmental factor that is coming out strongly since we started this conversation. From the society, a child has a problem, a teenager has a problem. If he goes to the society, you get mocked, you get blamed. Why? If you go to the parent, you get disciplined, well, canned in a way. If you go to the church also, it's still discrimination. They judge you, you are a sinner. How do we help our teenagers who do they run to? If a teenager has a problem, who should be the first person that they run to?
So currently, teenagers run to each other. When they have problems, they run to each other. That's what the studies are telling us. And that's what we also found when we conducted a study last year on just trying to understand the levels of information and awareness on reproductive health and rights among young people, among women and girls. We went to 5 counties, and the findings were the same, that the first port of call for young people is their peers. They go to each other. Yes. So to respond to your question on who should they run to, well, it's not an easy question, and it's not an easy answer that I could give. The thing is, we need to recalibrate ourselves as a society. We've said this countless times. What we need to do is to begin revisiting how we view young people. First, how we view sexuality as a society, how we view reproductive health and rights, and how we view young people. And it's all these elements that we were talking about that need to go through that process of recalibration, so that we are creating an environment that is actually supportive of the transition of young people from children into adulthood. At the moment, what children find is when they go to facilities, they sometimes find judgmental health providers who don't want to offer them services, information and services. When they go to the school, this information is missing because the school has been, we do not have a curriculum within the schools that children are able to receive comprehensive sexuality education or information on sexuality and reproduction and all those things. When they go to the religious institution, they are taught about obeying the 10 commandments without putting that into context. When they go to the society, so it's a recalibration that we need to go through as a society, so that we emerge with a framework that is actually supportive, that enables children and young people to transition properly into adulthood.
Yeah. So one of the things that we are doing to respond to that, we are developing a parent's manual that provides skills and information on sexuality, and that can enable parents to have the background information. We are all inadequately prepared for talking about these things. So we need to have tools that would prepare parents to be able to address this to children.
Because no one is an expert in parenting.
Yes, yeah, nobody's an expert in parenting, but there could be basic information that you need, especially around sexuality. Secondly, we are engaging religious institutions to see whether it's possible also to develop some material for churches that can also address issues around sexuality for adolescents within the church framework, because we need this information at every corner. We need it in school, we need it in the hospital, we need it in church, we need it at the family level, so that we are talking consistently about the same message, and we are providing information that is accurate and that is not based on values or rumors, that, you know, this is what is correct and this is what should be delivered to our children.
And I'm looking at teenage dating, because it comes.
Yeah.
And looking at the stats, people started dating at very tender ages. 14, I don't know you mtu wako class gani at the age of 14. But I'm looking at the dating aspect. The first time a parent hears that the daughter is having a boyfriend, there is that alarm that goes. Things will not go well in that family. What should be the first step that a parent should take after learning that the daughter might be in a relationship with the opposite sex? And that is for the parent side. On the teenager side, at what time is the right time? Because that question goes, it's normally asked in almost every seminar that I've attended. When is the right time to start dating for a teenager? That question is always there. What should parents do? Coming to you still, Mr. Church.
I think there are many things that come with relationships. One of them is handling emotions of being rejected, for example. The other one is that you thought you were really falling in love, and you realize when you get closer into this relationship, it was just infatuation. There's nothing between the two of you.
And sometimes you can't distinguish
as a boy and a girl, and you can't distinguish between the two. And there are numerous things that are happening. And young people, you're growing, so you are not mentally developed to respond to some of the issues that may come out of this relationship. And therefore, what we are saying is to enable children to be prepared to respond to emotional challenges that come in relationship building, in dating, and all these kind of things. To be able also to identify what are the risky situations if you're starting to get into a relationship, including being able to identify occasions when you can get into sexual violence or something is going to happen to you. So all these preparatory processes need to be prepared and need to be provided to children. And that means that, you know, by 10 years, by 12, 13, 14, you do not have sufficient capacities to handle some of these challenges that come with relationship. So it's not possible to pinpoint and say age 14 is the correct age, or age 15 is the correct age. I think it is the emotional and physical growth that comes with these challenges, the regular talking, the build-up, so that children are adequately prepared to be able to know that I can only go this far, that these are the boundaries that I need to lay, that this is how I need to communicate in terms of handling rejection or handling a relationship or handling feelings, and what is it I can do if I'm getting into. So these boundaries can only be developed and defined if children have been given the information. Similarly, parents need to appreciate that, you know, this is a growth process. All of us have gone through this process. We became parents because we started to build a relationship. So parents need to recognize that my child is growing, my child is starting to get into puberty, or my child is starting to develop sexual feelings, and that the children need to be prepared how to handle these situations.
And because we also have sexual reproductive health rights that are there. But there is lack of information that is there. And there's a verse that is in the Bible that people suffer because of lack of knowledge and understanding. How do we make them realize that in as much as, yes, there are rights, but there must be responsibilities? At the same time, this is a child who is growing, and they believe that I have a right to date whomever I want. I have a right to have any sexual affair with whomever I want. Rights come with responsibilities. Do you agree?
Yes, rights come with responsibilities, but the attitude that, or what we are seeing from a legal perspective in many of the African countries, including ours, is that we've taken the approach that sexual and reproductive health and rights of children are limited. And that's why we have imposed a cut-off age that makes it, you know, we say that children below that age, minors cannot engage in sexual conduct. It's problematic because, one, it sends a message to young people that they are wrong when they have these needs that arise, that it creates that confusion among them in terms of where they should go and get assistance or where they should go and get more information because to understand what they are going through.
It's a biological process that will come, but the law prohibits you.
Precisely. Secondly, it creates some confusion even among service providers. Yes, we have a very good policy framework, but we know what policies are. Policies are statements of intent. And so how do you action that intent? You action it by creating structures. You work on the infrastructure so that either services are provided, information is being provided, but policies become effective when they are reinforced by the law. So we have to have a situation where the laws and the policies are reading into each other, they are complementing each other and not contradicting each other. So yes, it is indeed true that rights come with responsibilities, but the approach that we have taken as a country, where we view children as having limited rights, we actually don't view them as having rights at all, except those that relate to their maintenance, you know, their schooling, education, and so on and so forth is problematic.
Although the rest are ignored.
And we need to work on that. We are not saying that they access these rights. Rights can be limited, but as we've seen in Kilifi, in Bomet, in Kakamega, where children were doing their exams on delivery beds, we are being told as a society that we really need to think critically. We need to create an enabling environment that is supportive of children. And the enabling environment is not just information, it's not just destigmatizing teenage sexuality, it's also ensuring that the legal and policy framework is supportive of adolescents in their comprehensively supportive of adolescents and their reproductive health needs and rights.
For a parent, because these issues to do with sexuality is prone to happen, and as you said, no one is an expert in parenting. No one has a PhD in being a parent to come and educate others to say, hey, I have a PhD, so listen to me. This is how parenting should be, because we are all learning as we grow. How should a parent establish that common ground to start that discussion? Because once a child reaches adolescence, that discussion needs to have taken place in order for them to be at par with the child, so that the child grows with them and they grow together with the child during that whole period of adolescence. How do you establish that common ground, and where do you start from as a parent?
I think one of the cardinal issues is communication, that there must be good communication between a parent and a child. The other one is just a safe environment at home, an environment in which children can be able to express themselves and feel safe to the people they are talking to, and also feeling safe to talk about the issues that you want to talk about. And thirdly, the children need to be guaranteed, confidentiality about the things that they are telling adults, and that these things are not going to be used against them or taken to the public arena where they are going to be ridiculed. So I think some of these basic tenets, if they're built at the household level or even at the school level or the church level, then it's very possible that we establish very good communication channels between parents and children around sexual reproductive health.
Sasa ambayo ufanya makosa unakumbuka kitu uliniambia.
Yeah.
Yeah. We should avoid that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should avoid that. Let's talk about contraceptives, because it is happening. What do you say about the use of contraceptives? The increase of contraceptives for the youths, and for the teenagers has is there is an increase in the number of contraceptive used for the teenagers? Is it alarming? Is this something we need to curb? Is this something we need to reduce in terms of the numbers of contraceptives used by teenagers? Is it going to even affect them in future? Because at the same time, we have their reproductive organs that are there that might be affected. Yes.
So what the studies, what the information that is out there is telling us is that there is an increase in the use of emergency contraception and not necessarily in the use of these other contraceptive methods that exist. And that is that is a challenge, that is a huge problem because it could be a pointer to, it points to a disconnect between the contraceptive needs that are presenting among adolescents and access to the commodities. And like we indicated earlier, when children go to facilities, in some facilities they are turned away because they are not viewed as, or they are asked to come back with their parents. Reflecting on the study that I mentioned that we conducted last year with our partner TICA, this is exactly what we found, that young people were going to facilities and they were not getting the services that they require. So these teenage pregnancies that we are talking about come at the tail end of several failures. There is a failure in terms of access to information. There is a mismatch with regard to the needs that adolescents are presenting, young people are presenting, in terms of they go to a facility, they want contraceptives, which means they are already sexually active, or they intend to be sexually active. There is a mismatch, they are unable to access services. And when they are turned away, it does not mean that they will not do what they intended to do. It just means that they will do it unsafely, exposing themselves to, to the risk of pregnancy, sexually transmitted infections, and HIV and AIDS. So there is a huge disconnect with regard to contraceptive, the needs that present in relation to adolescents wanting to access contraceptives and their access to contraceptives. Yes, which
do they have easy access, if at all you, because they cannot get it from the centers, yeah? So they will look for it elsewhere. And we have cases of adolescents who have died while in the process of even going for other services like abortion. Some have died, some have had botched abortion, and my, oh my, the media reports were bad. If at all you look at that, is there a way that we can limit this? It means that there is sexual activity amongst teenagers, yet at the same time, as parents, we're talking about sex before marriage is bad.
Yeah, and that's exactly. So when they go to a facility with a problem and they are turned away, they will still do what they intended to do. It's only that they will do it unsafely. So even with pregnancies, when they mistimed or unplanned or unwanted pregnancies, what will happen is that because of this environment we've created that is really not supportive of the needs of adolescents, they will go to a quack in the village. They will ask their friends, please, I have this problem. How can I get it sorted out? And they will go to a quack. And the quack, the challenges that come with a quack. And this is not hypothetical. We actually litigated a case of a young person, a young girl called JMM, who got pregnant when she was 2 months pregnant is when she discovered, when she missed her menses for 2 months, she discovers she was pregnant. And then she asks, I don't know, an older person that she was living with, as her peer that she was living with, this is the challenge that I have. The peer takes her to a quack, an unqualified service provider, an abortion is performed, complications arise, she ends up in several facilities, she finally has challenges with her kidneys, and this young girl whose case we litigated, just to demonstrate the impact of failing to put in place adequate measures to enable women and girls to access services, she actually died. She passed on last year. Wow. So these are not hypothetical cases. This is what is happening to young people. They go to facilities, they are turned away, they are not assisted in a way that is supportive of them, and they seek unsafe means to either, terminate pregnancies or to prevent themselves from getting pregnant, which is problematic.
And this is why we need to have this conversation from home. Remember, this is something that we need to talk about. Give us your comments about this. Remember, our SMS line is up and running, 20154. Start with the word Channel 1. Tell us your name and where you're watching us from. On Twitter, our social media platforms are also up and running. On Twitter, use the hashtag Good Morning Kenya. Tag me at Ramaguko, my colleague's handle at Jane Wambui, and our official station handle at KBC Television. This is a conversation we need to have because at the same time, lives are being lost. How can we curb this? Mr. Albert, I'm looking at the case that she has mentioned. Contraceptive, the use of contraceptives is there. Someone has just engaged in sex. They get to the point of learning later on that they are pregnant and they realize, oh, my father is like this, my mother is like this. Sometimes they don't even have parents. They don't know what next. What should a teenager go for? How can we as a society solve these kind of problems?
I think one system in Kenya that is important is that there is a policy in terms of how to provide contraceptive services, both to adolescents and young people. And the underlying principle is, when people are sexually active, they should have firstly access to information from the service providers. So it's not correct, looking back at what we talked about in terms of rights and responsibilities, it's not correct to deny a young person information just because you think the person is young. The person has come for services, you need to provide information to this particular.
You should not provide, even
without
a parent.
You should not deny. One of the major challenges in terms of getting services, if I'm sexually active, it's very difficult for me to go with my mother to a hospital or to go with my father. No young person would do such a thing.
And so,
so that's one issue that many people insist that you have to come with parent. But we are saying parental consent is one of the obstacles for young people to get services. Secondly, other than being provided information, young people have entitlement to services, and we are saying they should be quality standard services that are provided in public health facilities or even private health facilities. And so young people should also not be denied services just on the basis of age or because of individual values in terms of how we see them when they come to seek services. And all these conditionalities are outlined in policy documents, are outlined in service charters, that we need to respond to the needs of young people in an objective, fair manner that respects their rights and allows them to get services the way anybody else would get services in this country. You are no less a Kenyan if you're young. You're like anybody else. You have entitlements in terms of being handled respectively and respectfully and responsibly in terms of getting services.
Yes, you may be young, but still a Kenyan.
Yes, you may be young, but you're still Kenyan, and you still have some rights in terms of services. And those are the things that we are saying they should be respected, they should be maintained, and we should allow young people to come to services. More often than not, young people are not coming for services because of the stigma that is given to them, because of their age, because of the values that we have, because of the cultural context in which we are operating, and therefore these are the factors that we use to deny adolescents and young people services. But we are saying that there are directives, there are procedures that allow us as adults and the service providers to respond to the needs of adolescents when they come for services.
All right.
We have also said that even if there are all these rights, there are also responsibilities, isn't it?
Yes.
So young people do not want to be the ones that responsible for harming each other around sexuality. They don't want, they shouldn't use force. They should protect themselves, but also protect their peers. So it comes both ways, that you have entitlements, but you have responsibilities around the way you handle your sexuality in society.
All right, and as we continue with this discussion, let's take a look at what's happening on social media, because I wonder, for the parent, once your child tells you they are pregnant, what do you do? What is that is the shock of a lifetime. Some end up having heart attacks, and then they say, my son, you've killed me. Let's take a look at social media. Jane is on the other side of the studio to take a look at what you are saying. So Jane, sexual education is very important for teenagers.
It is very important. You've asked a very pertinent question. When your child tells you they are expectant, how do you react? I was once in that situation, and I can tell you for a fact it wasn't an easy path to walk, but here we are celebrating the next generation.
And they still love you.
Sorry?
They still love you the way you are.
They adore me. Let us just quickly have a look at what is happening on social media. Let's just start with Twitter. There's a Chief Dan who is saying, in my opinion, I feel like everyone should take part when it comes to sexual matters affecting our teenagers. Well, I can only allow my kids to have a partner when they attain the age of 18. Age limitations when it comes to allowing your children to start getting involved with the opposite gender. Maybe you could respond to that. I know you had touched on it a bit, but for the benefit of our view, you could just touch on it once more before we get to sample some more tweets.
Age limitation. Coming to you, yes. What he has said.
So it's difficult. It's not an easy. So young people are not waiting until 18 to have relationships. That is the reality. And you mentioned the Kenya Demographic and Health Survey that indicated that the age of sexual debut was 18. Well, in some counties like Busia and others, the age of sexual debut was as low as 15. In some counties, it was 14, and so on and so forth. So it's just indicative of the fact that young people are getting into relationships at a younger age. So what I think in these situations, what we have been saying is we need to create an open society where young people are free to come and have conversations with their parents about relationships, about people they are interested in, and their parents supporting them. It does not mean that when a young person brings a boyfriend at 14 or at 15, that they will necessarily have sex. So we have to disconnect the two, the relationship from the sex, and build an environment where they are coming to actually tell you as a parent that, Ram, Dad, if you're a father, this is my friend, we want to go to the movies, and you creating an environment where you are supporting them in this friendship that does not necessarily have to translate into sexual conduct.
And that's the problem. That was actually what I had asked in the first section of the interview. What time do you allow your child to even have a boyfriend? You've talked about going out on movies and things like that. You know, these African setups. Someone talk about a boyfriend, huh? Mr. Albert, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I was just smiling because Lucy said that if you're a dad, but you know Ram is not a dad. Yeah, so I think we already said that, you know, there are no standards. It's not cast in stone. You can't say that this is the age at which you are going to start building a relationship. But we have also said that sometimes it's not very clear to children whether they are in love or whether it's just a feeling they have, and whether this feeling is going to go away, or whether they are attracted to people who are older than themselves, etc. So it's a variety of factors that need to be considered. But by and large, we are saying it's important that through information we can prepare children to know how to respond to situations when they get in those situations.
All right.
So to define the boundaries, to define when it's genuinely starting to be a relationship, and how to grow up in that relationship.
Yeah. Jane?
Maybe just one last tweet in regards to sexuality. There's a page by Youth Network for Community and Sustainable Development. They say by giving today's youth and girls in particular a better understanding of their bodies, we can give them the power to protect their health and ultimately their futures. So I believe, we need to have these conversations with our children starting at a very young age, because we have all been in an environment where you see parents, they find it cute when a boy, like a two-year-old girl are hugging each other, kissing each other. We find it cute. But when they get to 16 and you see that, you're like, no, no, bad. So what are we doing? If we show them it's okay when you're a baby, but when you get to an age where it's supposed to happen, that it's wrong. So, we are also not leading them the right way. So let's just empower them with the knowledge that they need to better make these decisions for themselves and ultimately for their futures. That's that from my end. So back to you, Ram.
Jane, I couldn't have said it better. That is Jane Wambui on the other side. Remember, keep texting, keep tweeting. The hashtag on Twitter is Good Morning Kenya. Tag me at Ram Maguko, my colleague's handle at Jane Wambui. Remember, the official station handle is at KBC Television. What do you think about it? And we want to bring this discussion to a close. And the question that I asked before we went there, what should the parent do once you realize your child is pregnant? The first thing that comes into a parent's mind, I know you think about how far you've come, school fees and things like that. But what would you advise parents?
I think what we are seeing in the Kenyan society is that pregnancy brings huge emotions both for the child and for the parent. And because of how we react as parents, it's very possible that it could end into suicide or in some other adverse behaviors from the child. So I think it's critical that parents approach teenage pregnancy in a good way, in a supportive way. And this means access to counseling and support services, options of being able to bring up this pregnancy, but also more critically that children who are already pregnant, we know that there are options in terms of being able to go back to school even after the pregnancy, in terms of the return to school as an option. So parents need to have all these options to be able to know how to support children through these processes.
And I would like to come to you, just address this one question specifically. Let's talk about sexual harassment, sexual violence towards teenagers. It is common, it has happened, and it has led to so many broken families. What would you say about that?
In short, it's a pandemic, and we have a legal framework that we should be applying to ensure that survivors of sexual violence actually access justice from the courts. We are seeing an increasing number of, at least from the courts, the statistics show that sexual violence is one of the high-ranking, cases that are dealt with by the judiciary. And what we just need to do is to make sure that we are not conflating sexual violence with consensual sexual conduct that's happening among adolescents, which has resulted in young men actually being imprisoned and jailed. We have several cases, not just in Nairobi, in the other counties, and it's a big problem. So it's a balance that we need to make sure that we are protecting our young people from sexual violence, but at the same time not penalizing them for engaging in conduct among each other that is consensual in nature.
All right. Final question, Bona Albert. We have the unfortunate aspect of adolescents being jailed for consensual sexual conduct. What would you say of that briefly within 1 minute?
I think, as already mentioned by Lucy, we have already described and said that sexual and sexual behavior is starting quite early amongst young people. But it's also possible that adolescents or young people, 15, 16, 17 years, are starting to engage in a relationship. And this relationship is consensual. It's not that they have been forced or it's the use of violence. So it's important important that the law is repealed and reviewed to recognize the fact that adolescents and young people can get into sexual relations consensually, and that this relationship should not be the reason why then they are jailed for getting into a relationship.
All right. All right, thank you very much. That is Albert Obui, the Executive Director for Center for the Study of Adolescents, and Lucy Minayo, Capacity Building Manager, Center for Reproductive Rights. Thank you very much for joining me. It has been a pleasure having you in studio.
Thank you.
Right. And
Thank you,
just I have Steve Fugutu saying good topic. Sexual education should start from the family as early as possible. Parents shouldn't wait for children to discover sex issues by themselves. Thank you very much, Steve. I'm seeing here one person is saying children should be made aware that there is no sex before marriage. 1 Thessalonians 4:3-8. Many parents fear disclosing such issues to their children. All right, keep texting. Keep tweeting. That is a wrap on my end when it comes to Matters Health Tuesday. It has been a pleasure having you. Keep it KBC. We're taking a short break. We'll be back in a bit. My name is Ram Aguko. Keep it. Good morning, Kenya.